just like all the leaves coming out, the grass just like going up like, and like,
yeah, this is peak overgrown. You can't even like step anywhere.
No, got like leaves clinging to your ankles, and it's. Thank you. Bless this space. Yeah.
Did you listen to that Red Scare episode?
Yeah, I listened to it. To be honest, I thought it was a little bit boring because I don't like. The meta idea of being interested in religious thought, like earnestly, is kind of interesting. But the specific content, I was like, I don't care about what some nun thought they saw 100 years ago. It seemed like it was like this weird little sub-universe.
It was a weird little sub-universe. It was novel to me just to witness the trad cath community.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And see the different reactions that the youth are having to the existential void.
Yeah.
And the different things people are doing about it. Retreating into dogma being one of them.
Yeah.
But it's not even so simple as retreating into Catholic dogma. It's got to be like filled with interesting conspiracy theories.
Oh yeah, that's
and
a good point.
Illuminati, and the Pope isn't the real Pope, and
It's just QAnon.
yeah.
Wow.
And listening to Dasha try and grapple, like, she was in a hall of mirrors, and they were both self-aware a bit that, like, she was purposely putting herself in this hall of mirrors so she wouldn't have to think about the things she's swearing off for Lent. But like, if you accept like one irrational thing, it like puts you in a hall of mirrors immediately. Like, you can't take any like one part of the logic seriously without like, okay, well now you're fucked. Like, to be saved and go to heaven, you have to do these specific things, but these specific things can only be done by those specific people.
And like, a priest like baptized you, but was he a real priest? Because who baptized him? And like, what if the Pope wasn't the real Pope ever since, what was it, Vatican II?
Mm-hmm.
When was that? Was that like in the 100 years ago?
There was a Second Vatican Convention or something in the 70s or so.
Okay.
And that's when these conspiracy theorists have decided that the Pope became replaced by a bad actor from the Freemasons.
I think that, well, you made a really good point about how retreating into dogma isn't even enough. The dogma has to be filled with conspiracy theories. Like, it's really just a crisis of like trust in institutions that you have QAnon in politics, and you have the anti-Pope in Catholicism. And I think that maybe, what does that say about, like, maybe we just have a really big appetite for conspiracy theories now. And we need to believe that there's something going on, otherwise we feel like we're being taken advantage of. Like, you've been lied to, and so you're like, okay, I'm on to this. Fool me once. The next time I'm going to believe something, I'm going to make sure that I believe the thing I'm not supposed to believe, so that I can't be, led like an unwilling sheeple. I'm trying to think of what's the singular of...
I think it's just sheep.
But then how do you know that it's a person who's a sheep?
What's the singular of a sheep? A ship?
Shipperson. Shipple.
A shipple?
Yeah. A person.
A sheep. A shoplight?
The fuck? Isn't that like a brand of something? A shoplight?
I don't know. There's hoplite.
Hoplite.
And that's from Age of Empires.
Oh yeah,
probably.
the hoplites. Oh yeah, yeah. They're the hoplites. Then they have like a spear and a sword. They like advance and like.
I don't know. Hoplite specifically because there's an O and a hop in it. I'm picturing a round shield and a spear that they like put over the shield.
Hoplite sounds like a pair of basketball shoes. Am I right? Just kidding. Yeah, I think the dogma is really boring. Of like, I don't blame people for wanting to have conspiracy theories because, God, they were being very self-aware about it in that episode. Like, particularly Anna was like, she was kind of like, I could tell like a little bit like, okay, we're talking about this on the podcast. I'm gonna make sure I gotta go out of my way to like indicate subtly to everybody that I don't really believe this. I'm gonna try to touch the ground of reality here and make some comment about this that is like relevant to the world we're living in. I mean, yeah, that's what I would have done. That's kind of where my mind went the whole time, was I just like thought like, okay, what does it say about our world that this is happening? And like trad caths in general, like the retreat into institutional religion reminds me of something you said a few episodes back about how like you were disappointed in Christians because it's like just boring. Like, come up with something new instead of going backwards.
Yeah, it's not progressive enough.
No, it is. Yeah, it's a very honest, simple, unnuanced. Just there's a reason why. But conservatism is just lacking in novelty.
But remember my prompt last week that people don't grab philosophies because they're true.
Yeah.
They grab philosophies because they help them specifically do what they are doing.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question.
And where they're going. And think about Anna and Dasha, like they're setting themselves up for family rearing.
100%.
And so they're creating mythologies of structure. And like, okay, if they don't exist, then we make them. We make these mythologies of structure. And, oh God, I lost it. What I loved about listening to all that bullshit that was like completely incoherent. Like, I had no idea there were so many magic phrases in the Catholic dogma. Like, so many like special words that are capitalized. Like, you can hear the capitalization when they say the words.
Like a Trump tweet.
And it's these beliefs and words that have power. And if a special person says these special specific words, then that has power. Like divine power.
Like the Pope is gonna like shake a stick at like Putin and like fix the war or
something. And that's gonna fix the war. Yeah.
Consecrate Russia or something like that.
And it's not just consecrate Russia. It's some phrase like the Pope is scheduled to consecrate Russia into the Immaculate Heart of the Virgin Mary. Plus like 2 more adjectives about how beautiful Mary is. Like that phrase, he's not going to consecrate Russia. He's going to, that entire phrase, it.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world where like that dude literally gets to go up on TV and say that I'm going to say some magic words to solve the problems of the world, and like all the various national...
Isn't that way more honest? Isn't that a way more honest presentation than like the president of the American or the president of the United States appointing Fauci, and Fauci says the magic words, and you do the magic
interesting.
COVID test, and you obviously take the sacrament of the jab, and now you're saved.
Well, yeah, maybe
it's like, don't pay attention to the fact that you can still catch it and still spread it.
Fascinating. Yeah, everyone's just consecrating everybody. We're just like, some people are just like straight up, this is religion. And other people are like, this is not religion. Different.
Yeah.
Science. Yeah.
And
that's true.
And then going from that,
Wow.
what I loved about it.
It doesn't make religion any stupider.
No, I had completely forgotten just how stupid religion was until I listened to this episode.
Or no, wait, I meant to say it doesn't make religion any less stupid. That's what I was trying to say.
That's what you said.
I said any. Okay, yeah. And then right.
That's totally what you said the first time.
Yeah. My point, just to clarify, I feel like Fauci, the Pope, these people, I think they're on one. I consider them the same type of person. I think that depending on your political inclinations, you could make a pretty strong case that either one of them is the devil, and there are plenty of people who think the Pope is the devil. I don't even know why they, I remember one time I was in Mexico City, and I walked around the central square of, there was a big Catholic church there, and there was tourists taking pictures and stuff.
Wait, say again where you were?
I was in Mexico City.
Got it.
This was I think it was 2018 or something. I was walking around the central plaza, and there's this big Catholic church that was built by the colonial people, and it was, it's a big tourist attraction, so there's people taking photos, and then there's protesters, Mexicans clearly, who live there, and there was this dude who was wearing a huge Pope hat, except the Pope hat was a giant dick, and he was walking around had holding this sign that had all this obscure occult imagery on it that was I didn't even need to read Spanish. I didn't even know what they were saying. It was basically the Pope is the devil. Everything that I don't understand and is evil is the devil. It's just a very simple message that is communicated in universal symbols, and it has something to do with I don't know, the patriarchy. I don't fucking know. But it was, I think it's just such a universal thing, is when you give people political power and you have a society in which there's a myth that can't back itself up. That's what creates conspiracy theories. When you have power without effective leaders, and it's literally what a conspiracy theory is that there's things are happening for no reason. We don't understand why, which is true, except there's a further layer, is that you don't actually, the average person who thinks that the world is run by a cabal of evil people doesn't understand that the depth to which nobody knows what's happening. And I think that
not even the people at top.
No, and there's a need there's a need to have a Fauci in a time of crisis when you don't have effective ability to respond. So I think that, whether it's a virus or it's the metaphysical sense of doom that is pressing on the psyches of people who don't have religion in the ordinary sense of the word, you have to appoint some kind of prophet to be the symbol of why things aren't being fixed. And so, can you imagine a society in which everything was functional wouldn't have many conspiracy theories, because people would be wait, what? That's weird.
So to finish my thought about the episode, Anna was supporting Dasha in this exploration. She's playing her up.
Yes.
And giving her the benefit of the doubt and giving her center stage to say all this shit. And I thought it was beautiful because they were creating something artistic out of this. On the face of it, it's a really fucking stupid thing to start subscribing to.
Yeah.
So what's going on that real value is being created out of it? And just by virtue of following through with it to the hilt, trying to be Catholic as hard as possible, they're able to make something. I thought it was a really beautiful episode. It was so fun to learn about the ins and outs of this completely incoherent religion.
Yeah.
And they did what their stated responsibility to culture is, which is to make funny podcasts.
Right.
And so it's almost like the direction you choose is arbitrary. It's the way you tread that path.
It's like, remember when Stephen Colbert was funny back in the day?
Mm-hmm.
How
Yes.
he had this thing about like, he had his finger on the pulse of something. I remember he had a book that was written in like early 2010s that was called America, Rebecoming the Greatness We Never Weren't.
Yes. Yeah.
And like, that's just MAGA.
Yes.
But he artistically felt that and articulated it humorously like half a decade before it was a thing that anyone knew was going to have any power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the artist is basically taking something that is relevant and has some kind of cultural power and just digging it up and going, here it is. I wonder if the trad cath or various trad, versions of old school religion are going to, I don't think they're actually going to come back. I think they're going to be kind of like a meme version of themselves if they do come back. Because no one honestly believes it. They want to believe it. They believe that they believe it. Like how people don't really want to go to church. They want to go to church. They like the idea of going to church because it is it's a myth making, like you said, that sets the stage. It dresses up your realities to make you feel as if it might actually be possible to have a family and have a stable life and have some kind of certainty, and just like, can't things just be limited in a way that I just have to think about like my job, my family, my kids, like most people have, and like that's what trad is. It's kind of like I think that's why I'm just against it. Is it's a shrinking away from the world. The basic reality of the world is so much more interesting than any story you could ever make about it. I wish people had more inspiring options than retreating into last century's conspiracy theories.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak for other people. I think even just living in Chico a lot, like you and I does, gives us a kind of support system that other people don't have.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, take my psyche and your psyche and put it in Manhattan or Brooklyn, and try to have a sane life, and like you might find yourself doing illogical things that are completely illogical, but like the corrosive gas of nihilism is so prevalent that like if you're going to even have a clear thought that's your own, it has to be like senselessly reactive. And
That's interesting. Yeah, I think about what would happen if I
like
moved.
we're just God's hierarchy of goodness is just like, here we are, we're in it.
Yeah.
You can't it's the air we live and breathe, and it's like the trees the thousands of trees we pass by every day.
Yeah, it is easy for us to say like, stop freaking out, because we have psychologically the support that we feel like life is still real in some sense. And so like we have more in common with the past in a visceral way than us. Yeah, I wish I had a more concrete familiarity with just like what are people's lives now? What is the average person's life like? Take a random person, random city, like, you're living in I don't know, like, let's just pull something out of a hat. San Ramon, okay, suburb of San Francisco. There's just housing developments. There's there's like a Buffalo Wild Wings and like a 680 just going through your city. Like, what do you do every day? I don't know.
I guess you pick some sort of internet community that fits your aesthetics. And
yeah, like if you live in a place that doesn't have it doesn't have street culture. That's what it is, street culture.
Yeah.
And I know we're sitting in a forest, and it's weird to call being in a forest street culture, but it is street culture. Street culture is like culture that is centered around physical space, I would say. Common physical space.
Yes, yeah.
And is not abstract in a sense where like we're gonna meet here, but it's like street culture is culture that comes after as a result and is derivative of physical space, where you can just leave the house and something will happen to you.
And you physically are directed to certain places over others.
And there's an energetic landscape in your city of where good things are that you can be attracted to instead of everything being like this homogeneous mist of just like Google Maps data. Abstract locations. Yeah. Oh man, what if there was like a map of cultural space? That would be really cool.
Isn't that social media?
No, but like with like an analog to a physical location. Because I know, so Google Maps has this thing where there's like a busy area. Have you seen that? Where like and it aggregates, so maybe like presumably, I guess you can avoid like a busy parking lot or something. But that'd be cool if, and see, this would never work on centralized platforms because it would it's just like way too politically dangerous to have an app that actually organizes people in physical space, and it would be like banned immediately. In most countries of the world.
Yeah, it's too empowering.
Honestly, it's too empowering to have people actually have physical online. But I think that's like where it's going, and what I'm going to try to personally help along is the development of physical social media analogs. Like the joke version of it, like the original flash in the pan meme version was the flash mob phenomenon that happened in the early the 2000s, where it's like, we all have this thing now where we can like send a mass message to a bunch of people. What if everybody showed up in the mall at 3 p.m. and did a funny dance and then ran away? And then it was like that was like what a lot of the early videos on YouTube were, is that kind of phenomenon. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, that's kind of funny, but like there's no community there. Like that'd be sick if there was like a social media internet community that was like a traveling circus or like a street market or like a illegal concert venue thing where you because I mean, it has to be that way.
Yeah, I've just taken it for granted that that's the way forward.
It is the way forward, yeah.
It's just not safe enough to build cultural institutions the normal way.
No.
Because they can just get wiped out by a germ, apparently.
Yeah, we have to build cultural institutions with a more resilient technology than is being used to try to suppress them.
You had a prompt this week, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a few prompts.
There's dimensions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the dimensions thing. I have like the dimensions thing, which is probably going to take a few minutes to explain and kind of set up. And then I have a prompt relating to the dimension thing about art. The dimension thing is not my idea. It's based on a video that I watched. But I found it very credible and interesting.
The Sagan video?
No, this is a video that's been on YouTube for a long time, but it's called Imagining the 10th Dimension.
I thought that was Carl Sagan.
No, this wasn't Carl Sagan. It's like something Carl Sagan would say. It totally could be a Carl Sagan video.
But is it the apple on a table?
No.
Thing?
No.
And
I mean,
the square land of the two-dimensional
it's
people?
related to that, but it goes farther. It goes further than that. No, this is a video that just talks more abstractly about, it's trying to imagine a ladder of dimensions, starting from the ones we're familiar with and going up to the 10th dimension. And to be completely honest, I was only able to get to, my understanding only reaches to the 7th dimension. I can't imagine dimension. I lost the plot past the 7th dimension of this dude's argument. But everything up until at least the 5th dimension made an incredible amount of sense to me. And so after I internalized that idea, it occurred to me that the various art forms that humans have classically undertaken sort of map onto this dimensionality. And I could think of examples of 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, and 5-dimensional art forms that exist in our world. And so I have to try to explain what I mean by those various dimensions first, and then I'll have to talk about the art thing.
Well, I think we know what 2nd and 3rd dimensional art already is.
Painting, sculpture.
Okay, so 4th dimensional art.
Music.
So 5th dimensional art.
Drama.
Like theater?
Now I'll justify this. So, just to do a quick overview of the dimension thing. So you imagine a point. That's a 0-dimensional space. Doesn't have height, doesn't have width, doesn't have depth, right? If you take 2 points, you can make a line. A line is 1-dimensional. A line is basically a bunch of points stacked end to end, okay? And that's like the theme, is that to get another dimension, you stack slices of the lower dimension, right? So if you want to make a square, like a 2-dimensional object, you stack a bunch of lines. So that's how you go from 1 dimension to 2 dimension. If you want to go 2 to 3, you can stack a bunch of pieces of paper to get a cube, right? And that's 3, right? And this is where it gets, so that's easy to imagine because we're living in 3 dimensions. We're 3 dimensional. We have bodies which are 3-dimensional. But sort of like the first leap in imagination comes when you identify time as the 4th dimension. And this is not controversial, like in physics, but imagining it this way, you can imagine like our 3-dimensional world is slices of 3-dimensional reality stacked up in the 4th dimension, and since we are 3-dimensional, we have 3-dimensional bodies, we experience one 3-dimensional slice of 4-dimensional reality, or of a 4-dimensional timeline at a time. And that word, timeline, is very interesting to take literally, because there's this image of a person. If you imagine yourself viewing a 4-dimensional object, let's say a human life, your human body in 4 dimension, you would see like a snake where like it starts off as like a little like egg, sperm thingy, and then it starts growing in this blob, and then it becomes a baby, and then it like turns into like an adolescent, and then it becomes a person, and you become an old person, and then you eventually die. So like a human body has a boundary in 4 dimensions. It has birth, death, and you have the 3-dimensional boundary of your body at every moment in that 4th dimensional timeline. So what's interesting is to think of, so if going by this theme that, 2D stacks together to make 3D, 3D stacks to make 4D timelines stack to make 5. So 5th dimensional space is the space of possible timelines that your life could take.
So the probable dimension, the dimension of probabilities.
Yes. And it's the dimension of free will. And what's interesting is that there's multiple ways to look at this. It's like, if you think about an animal, just a body, a dumb, non-living thing. Okay, not even an animal, a non-living thing, this log. Okay, that's living, that's a stupid example, a rock. That's a 3-dimensional object, right? Every object, when you're just talking about the base material of it, is 3-dimensional. Well, a mind, as we've talked about before, is a way of getting into the 4th dimension. So a mind, humans in particular, are very good at that we're able to see ahead by modeling the 3rd dimension enough that we can see the 4th. So animals can see the future too, though, to an extent. What's unique about humans is that not only can we see the 4th dimension, alone among the animals, we can see the 5th. This is my theory. This is not in the video, this is my imagination, okay? We can see not only what is going to happen, but what could happen and what we want to happen. And that's fun. That's like very interesting to me, because it's like it's a dimensionality thing that distinguishes human consciousness from other types of consciousness. Is it's like we're imagining a space of possible timelines, each of which is made of slices of physical reality. So that's pretty fascinating, and that's what makes me think that drama is what 5D art is. Because they've said like painting, sculpture.
Because you're displaying probable lines of time.
You're creating a conscious aesthetic. You're taking consciousness and you're putting it into a dimensional space for the sake of art, or whatever you think art is. The intentional creation of an artifact that represents consciousness, maybe what my working definition of art is, kind of. I don't, maybe there's some edge cases there, but so if I'm a painter, I'm gonna create a 2D painting, or I'm a sculptor, I create a 3D model. If I'm a musician, they say like a lot of traditional art, painting, sculpture is decorating space, music is decorating time, because you need like intervals. Well, drama is decorating timelines, because it's showing, because the fundamental ingredient of drama is choice. You can't have drama without decision, without suspense, without drama. It's literally. So I think it's really interesting that even the Greeks, they had painting, sculpture, music, and drama. They thousands of years ago, humans decorated all the dimensions we're aware of, and the fact that we took the time to decorate them indicates that we have some ability to perceive them. So that was my little trip about dimensionality. I just love it when humanistic things have some kind of like credible analog to the hard physical reality underneath.
The theme at the start of the thing of stacking a bunch of things from one dimension and then you get the next one, I'm not totally sure that holds up. I think like they all exist simultaneously. Like the 7th dimension or the 6th or the 10th, it doesn't exist if we manage to stack our pieces correctly to create it. It just exists, and we smell our way to it. Like to get from a point to a line, or rather from a line to a square, the second dimension, or us, the third dimension, has to like know something and act on that lower dimension to know to put the stacked points that are lines in a certain relationship so that they make a shape.
Yeah, it's our mind is doing that. It's an abstract. It's like but you're right. It's the ability of our mind to stack timelines, which is what we're simulating the 5th dimension in our 3-dimensional brain.
But I think we can't like really get to higher dimensions without help from actors in those dimensions.
How did those actors get there? Who was the first person to get into this? See what I mean?
I mean, they've probably been asking themselves that the whole time they've been there, just like we've been.
No, and that's, I mean, hey, if we already have life and consciousness in the 3rd dimension, think about what the fuck is going on in those higher dimensions where you have sort of much more space, more degrees of freedom, much more, I don't know, because, dimensions have a fundamental importance to the world because, like, you might ask, like, why are we 3-dimensional? Why do we have, like, it's a valid question to be like, why do we live in a 3-dimensional reality? 3 seems like an awfully arbitrary number. Why isn't it 4? Why isn't it 2? Well, I can tell you why it isn't 2. It isn't 2 because 2-dimensional animals would have a really hard time having a digestive tract because they would fall apart. They would fall in half. Most animals, every single animal that isn't a mycelial network is basically, topologically speaking, a donut. And that's important for thermodynamic reasons because you have to concentrate sources of energy in a way that they can be digested. So that's just an example of how, like, 2 dimensions doesn't have enough freedom of organization to create structures that are complex enough to reproduce easily. Maybe it could, given enough time or cleverness, but it's almost like the probability of us existing in the third dimension is much higher because there's more opportunities for that type of thing to exist. This is a variation of the anthropic principle, which is basically the idea that it's not surprising that we find ourselves in a universe suitable for life, because if it wasn't suitable, we wouldn't be here to wonder why it wasn't. So I think that, yeah, it's totally possible there could be like little microbes in the seventh dimension that are, every time they wiggle, it creates like timeline shit for us.
Totally.
Yeah. And it's like, what are they seeking, you know? They're probably seeking energy, the same thing we're seeking. But what energy is in those dimensions would look differently, perhaps.
Okay, so were you able to make any sense out of my Buddhist circular time prompt?
Absolutely. You were saying, okay, so since we're already talking about this imagine one of those four-dimensional timelines looped around, connecting to itself, so that, is this what you're saying, that your life, your personal conscious timeline is like kind of a closed finite loop that just keeps repeating, and that every moment on it is thus infinite from your perspective?
I'm saying that circles are the engines we have to use to make lines through time.
Okay, you have to explain that.
I'm building on my bike metaphor for life, where as far as the chain wheel is concerned, it never goes anywhere. It's just always in one part or another of its circle that the pedals are at.
Yeah.
It's infinitely going in its circle, but it's a human mind with free will that can use that eternally occurring circle to go specific places. So, and then I go from there to the not engineering-wise really practical, but philosophically really fascinating combustion engine, being the rotary engine.
The Mazda rotary engine?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The RX 1s through 7s. That the engine, things turn and hit and produce chambers for the explosions to happen in a triangular space.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it has a rotating cam, and basically it just has like, it's closing and opening the valves along the perimeter of the, yeah, it's a fascinating
of a
design.
triangular thing.
Yes.
And so that's really fascinating, and that's like, that's the bike metaphor, like hitting 3 different points eternally is able to drive this higher dimensional thing forward into different places. So then my own way of projecting the needed metaphysical structure onto my open void of a life is my 7 days, and every 7th day is a day off. My 7 weeks, every 7th week is a week off. And then every single day of those 7 days is like, I know what I'm doing on the day off. I know what I'm doing on Wednesday. I know what I'm doing on Thursday. I know what I'm doing on Friday. It's a 7-point rotary engine.
So are you saying the wheel of Dharma is an engine?
It could be. This is where, like, you can't just be Buddhist. You can't just be Western Christian or whatever Christians are these days, libtards. You have to be both to maximize the potential of a 21st century being. So then I was saying, okay, well, 3 is maybe not as good of an engine as if you could somehow work the same thing to have 7 points of impact. And then, well, that's not as good as like being a true circle, because then you have infinite points of impact.
Oh, interesting.
And then you can leverage like a huge amount of new energy out of the world at every single point of the circle you're in. So like every single point of infinite points, if you were this super being that could like leverage God's spark in every single present moment.
Thank you.
Then you could go really fast or something.
Yeah.
So then, an ascended master is someone who like fully sees the wheel of Dharma, and every single point of time they're in, they understand that they've been at that point infinite times before. And they're going to be at that point in the circle infinite more times from here. And so they have an infinite amount of experience to draw from of how best to act in this situation. Because as far as they're concerned, it's a circle. They've been, archetypally speaking, they've been at this point a zillion times before.
Do you feel like you've been at this point before?
Yes, we've filmed this podcast many times before on this day of the week, and we are getting better and better at it every time.
I see what you mean by this point. Yeah, it's the points have something in common with each other, and the higher dimension in the universe is able to treat those consolidated phenomenon as the possibility for a new thing that it can use to build something that depends upon this repeated thing, basically making it more... actually, you know what? That's funny. So the fourth dimension is the way that by making a bunch of similar three-dimensional things, like by repeating in the third dimension, you can build something in the fourth dimension. That's really basic. That's like saying, we're doing this podcast every single week in the third dimension, but now the podcast is a thing that exists in the fourth dimension. It wasn't before. There's a hyper object represented by the video feed that now has certain power, has more power over that fourth dimension because it has a kind of existence, it has almost depth to it.
But then there's further power, or torque, if you will, if the people driving that vehicle have somewhere they're going. Otherwise, it's just spinning its wheels.
Just doing donuts. Yeah.
So our idea last week of, maybe we should have a 6-week series and focus in one direction and have seasons and explore in specific directions for 6 weeks straight, then that's leveraging our wheel of, we're here every single week. As far as our rhythms are concerned, we're just eternally here on Friday mornings. But so we can use that though to go somewhere specific.
So the human mind.
So that's some kind of higher dimensional thinking acting on a lower dimension.
Well, it's I think even just in very concrete terms, our free will is kind of like a fifth dimensional entity. Our souls are fifth dimensional entity. If you want to say the soul is the source of free will, just for the sake of this discussion, our soul is a fifth dimensional entity because it can see the space, of possible timelines. And then the mind is a fourth dimensional entity because it can see what's going to happen along any particular timeline. And our body is a third dimensional entity. And we have this stack of technology of where our will is centered at the top, and we have the human will is we're making a space for these timelines to go, and then those timelines imagined make a space for our physical body to be in.
They do.
And so we're we're starting. This is like the pyramid. We're starting from the top. We're projecting. You have to project a will onto time, and then you have to project time onto your life, and then life, and then time is the space that life is filled with, and then will is the space that time is. Or wait, how do you say this? Hold on. Well, no, I think this is important. So time is the space that that can be filled with life, and then so that would imply that the human will is the will is the space that can be filled with life, with timelines. which is, of course, matches intuition. Like, you're creating more, you have to imagine futures for there to even be futures. There's an initial step. Like, it's not like a human mind is capable of computing, like, oh, I see what's going to happen. I'm going to be an astronaut. Like, or I'm going to be, I'm going to create a social media company, or I'm going to, like, become a famous musician. That's not something that's, like, obvious given just the mind's ability to see, like, oh, what's going to happen? The sun's probably going to keep going like this. I've seen it before. That's something totally different. That's like something that is its own internal, has, like, distilled that abstraction from all these different timelines. That's a fifth dimensional construct. There's no indication that that's going to happen other than the space of it, and that space creates, like, a vacuum that pulls time into it in some way. So does that mean God's sixth dimensional or something? Or there's demons and angels living in the higher dimensions?
I think in higher dimensions you see multiple gods. I've always thought that if there's one God, then there's infinite gods.
So there's not a God then. If there's infinite gods, then there's not a God.
Sure there is.
Okay, well, then you need a new word for that, because
all and everything.
Yeah.
Becoming conscious.
Yeah.
And then acting on itself.
I mean, well, it's okay. This is, whatever. I guess I can talk about the higher dimensions. This is because you're pointing right at it. The idea in this video was that the sixth dimension was the space of possible spaces. So basically universes. So it was like saying, like, okay, so fifth dimension,
like base rule sets within which webs of probability can exist in.
What initial conditions that created spaces in which possible timelines could exist.
Yeah.
And then the seventh dimension would be something like a multiverse, where it was like the space of all possible initial conditions, which would then create timelines, which, you know what I mean? So, and like I said, I got to 7, and then it was like, okay, yeah, I don't know what the fuck is, I don't know where there's...
I'm definitely not gonna bother stepping to 7. I'm at 6 and I'm chilling.
This dude should have quit while he was ahead. He should have quit while he was ahead. I was like, that is such an incredible way of making an argument. And like, to be clear, this guy was only talking about space. All this shit about, like, the human will and mind and art, this is my own bullshit that I'm putting onto this because this is what I connect. But, like, so I don't know. I honestly feel like writing this dude an email and being like, bro, like, you just inspired. And then he probably like smoking a blunt or something. I don't know. This video is from like 8 years ago, so I don't. Maybe who knows if he's still alive. But
as for God in the sixth dimension, though, I had a thought that sprung up when you asked the question of God producing stable structures.
Yeah.
God is the force that produces sameness, but then better and better and better structures allow for more and more chaos. Like, if a structure is too structured, then it's stagnant. It's literally not filled with God enough, because not enough can happen inside that structure. But an infinitely good structure is infinitely still and always the same, and yet somehow allowing for infinite probabilities of wild cards to happen at every single moment. So the physical, the laws of physics,
yeah,
God intruding into our perception,
yeah,
is the laws of physics.
Yeah, it's like something that chaos has in common with itself everywhere. The distilled essence of the world beyond the particulars beyond the random events. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's this, like, I think we both think that the world is becoming more complex and that fundamentally new, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I think, that the world is becoming, there is fundamentally new space being created all the time. Mm-hmm. When you look around, when you look in a telescope, and you look at a distant galaxy, the light you see is redshifted. That is to say, it has a lower frequency, a longer wavelength than would ordinarily be expected. And this is the Doppler effect. This is what happens when an object that is emitting light is moving away from you, because the light waves basically get stretched out. And this is the direct analog is, it's like when a siren drives past you and you hear like, woo, because like moving objects away from you, you know, they seem like a lower frequency. So there's there's an electromagnetic radiation analog of that thing, and it's called the redshift, right? But what's weird is that those galaxies aren't actually moving away from us in the ordinary sense. What's happening is that new space is being created at every point due to cosmic inflation. And that's fascinating because it sort of is very unsurprising. Like if you just accept that cosmic inflation is a thing and that three-dimensional space is growing, well then, and two-dimensional space and one-dimensional space, right? So we know four-dimensional space is continuing to grow because time is moving, and maybe five-dimensional space is also continuing to grow because what's possible in this universe continues to expand.
Well, I can intuitively think about the growth principle itself and go, yeah, that exists multidimensionally. But
it's interesting to think of inflation being more than three dimensions.
Yeah.
And if there's inflation in higher dimensions, we might experience that as the ex nihilo emergence of something like purpose. Because like, wouldn't a cosmic, like fifth dimensional expansion, like what is that? How would we feel that? What would that feel like to us in the third dimension?
Better art,
more like conscious experience, maybe. I mean, and this, this leads me to my question.
That Buddhist ascended master thing, like a bodhisattva that's able to like do one thing that acts in multiple dimensions at once, and he's aware of how it's affecting every single dimension.
Yeah, I think maybe we should think about, like, we always assume that we're in the third dimension, but what if we're not? What if we don't really know what dimension we're in. If you maybe our body makes sense to think of it as being in third dimension, but where are we? What dimension are we in? Are you and I? I mean, you and I are definitely in five dimensions right now, because I clearly, consciously experience I viscerally experience the drama of my life in the same way that I viscerally am conscious of this purple flower. It's not a thought, it's a perception.
Yeah.
And it's not, so it doesn't have to have words, it doesn't have to have constructs, it doesn't need neurons. This is the witness speaking. It's qualia, to use the comically clinicalized term for conscious experience. And also that would explain why some people are just driven to make art. I don't know if anyone's ever satisfactorily explained that to me.
Why making art?
Why are there some people that are, why are we making art?
Oh, why are you making satellite?
I don't know. I want to. Why do I want to do that?
You're reacting rationally to your perceptions.
I don't know if I'm being rational. I think my rational justification of this is an explanation, but it's not really the seat of my motivation.
You said before you enjoy it, and that's more baseline.
Yes, I enjoy it, but why do I enjoy it? Like, so, like, if I say, okay, I also enjoy eating food, but there's a rational explanation of why I enjoy that. But I enjoy, like...
Okay, so can't that apply to satellite?
No, because I wasn't evolved, or, okay, so it implies that I was evolved to create art. There's something about art that is necessary to our physical being. It's an instinct.
There's an instinct for innovation, for creativity. Yeah. We need it the way we need food.
Yeah.
Well, and we can't get food without creating value for our fellow man.
Yeah. Okay, so a blockchain is... Maybe it doesn't make any sense at all to think of it as dimensional space or not. It's trying to create, it's mapping, it's creating an abstraction. It's like an engine to build value, allow people to communicate value to each other.
And it's just leaving a mark of everywhere you go. It's
like our culture itself is becoming more embedded and inextricable. It's becoming more closely coupled to physical reality in a way that we all have this cultural belief that there's this data set that represents the truth about who deserves what and who has earned what. And it's almost like people don't have a choice whether or not to accept that reality because it's the biggest reality in the room. Mm-hmm. And all other realities can't stand up for themselves. Mm-hmm. So...
Yeah, it's the same phenomena going forward of like getting money clarified and getting systems of debt and loan and interest and credit, getting all that locked in. It's just the next forward thing of that, and at the base of all that is relating to each other in trustworthy manner.
Yeah. We need to have a language to talk about what we're worth.
And a language for on this day, this person said he was going to do X.
Yeah.
On this further day, X was achieved in this way.
Yeah.
And so then by this like new accreditation phenomena we've created on third point in the timeline, he was recognized for having both said he would do X and then doing X. And so he got a gold star on this third day.
Yeah, we have
It's just more and more sophisticated systems of like putting that into physical space.
Creating
putting the records
a way
down.
A method for discovering whose words line up with their actions.
And rewarding the people who do so.
Well, the knowledge, having that, being able to communicate that is its own reward. Because it opened doors for you. Like, if people knew that, wow. Man, humans have to get our money, we have to get the money thing sorted out. That is so critical. Did I tell you I've kind of become a Bitcoin maximalist a little bit? I never thought I would be.
What do you,
the Lightning Network, man.
In terms of BTC specifically.
Yeah.
No, you haven't.
Because I used to be like, oh, there'll be a bunch of different blockchains. I don't think so, man. I think
last week you were just saying like, man, I'm excited.
I'm excited.
And that was the only new thing about Bitcoin you're saying.
Yeah,
So now you're completely.
I mean, I'm like trying on the idea of
now you're putting on Satoshi's priest gown.
Yeah,
and declaring yourself.
I just think that I think that like. There's going to be the first blockchain that just manages to actually become usable. in a way that I can just like send money to you like it's like Venmo, except it's completely free, untraceable, uncensorable, and unstoppable.
So this is an example of when what I was saying was so beautiful to me about Dasha's episode, where it doesn't matter what direction you choose to actively build your experience along. It's just about follow through and doing it with gusto. And so she's building a more fertile, amazing experience for herself along an apparently arbitrary and stupid path, which is Catholicism. And so Bitcoin's another example of that. It's not that it's technologically the best one, or at first it wasn't. It
just has the most soul.
It's that it has the most soul, it has the most myth, it has the most drama.
It has the most myth.
And so just people following through with it made it is gonna make it the best potentially.
It has the heaviest cultural blockchain. It has the most blocks in culture. Because the cultural layer is the layer that blockchains sit on top of. A lot of people think they sit on top of the physical energy layer, but that's not true, because the cultural layer is the thingy that slides between the physical layer and the abstract blockchain, because everybody who's running a miner could agree that this is not the real version of the software. We're going to go to a completely different one and have a fork.
Isn't the strength of a given blockchain decided by its independence from culture?
Well, that's what Bitcoin has going for it, because it has an anonymous founder and it has this kind of like spiritual mythos around it that I think is like,
it's producing culture. It's not referring to culture.
It's a novel cultural object that somehow is the avatar or the flagship for the entire thing. And so it has the biggest resiliency in human culture. It has the deepest root holding on, and it would be hardest to uproot. Because if you said, let's say the Dogecoin or whatever, the Doge or whatever. Okay, so there's a bunch of competing dogs to that one, right? And, tastes might change. People might get sick of it. Elon Musk might do something really stupid, and since he's associated with it, honestly, that'd probably help it. But, so I don't know, maybe it's kind of like anti-fragile at this point. But, like, my point is that, like, there's like A-list, B-list, and then there's, like, a bunch of, like, spam stuff. But, I think that we have to take seriously the utility of a myth in terms of like the myth of Satoshi is a security feature. It's a defense against social engineering. It's a defense against people, because like if you wanted to try to attack a blockchain, the way you would do it is by demonizing it.
And you have to do character assassination.
Yes.
For that.
And you can't assassinate the dude because he's just a myth.
That's right.
So that was brilliant to be anonymous. I mean, I don't know, man. This guy saw the future, or I'm saying guy, but who knows who it was. But Satoshi Nakamoto, the legend, is more powerful than a person could be, because it's an invitation, a very conscious invitation for people to project their own hopes onto that. Everybody can imagine Satoshi the way they want to, just like you can imagine Jesus being your best friend.
So I wonder how many people are like me and imagine Satoshi Nakamoto as the keymaker from Matrix 2.
See? That's possible.
Because that's what I see in my mind. Is an Asian guy of that exact age with a slightly like bewildered look, because he's just constantly doing computations and is kind of like surprised that he's still physical.
This is just my humble prediction. If you want to make money, run a routing node for the Lightning Network. It's my humble prediction.
And what kind of startup capital does that require?
Not much. Just requires a lot of work and management. It's fast. I don't know. I can send you some links. It's really interesting.
I also meant sweat capital.
Oh, I don't know. Put in as much as you can handle. It's one of those things where right now, because the way the Lightning Network works is that basically it's a layer 2 on top of Bitcoin. So all the transactions, because the problem with Bitcoin, the reason why it hasn't been scaling is that there's too many transactions per second. The chain doesn't have enough capacity. The blocks are only 1 megabyte. So if everyone in the world is trying to send money to somebody at the same time, there's not enough data on the chain per second to be able to handle all those transactions. So what the Lightning Network does is it offloads those transactions onto private channels that you establish with people.
Yeah.
And those private channels are just like a bar tab where everybody just sends transactions back and forth with whoever they want to transact with, but it's done in such a way that if anyone cheats, either party can submit a transaction to the main chain, which puts everything back how it's supposed to be. And so, like the Bitcoin blockchain, the main chain is like this, almost like thing that just forces everyone to be honest, and so that people can, then you can transact with people knowing that you have some kind of like recourse in the event that they cheat you. So, the Lightning Network obviously is, since you only have private channels. If I don't have a private channel with you and I want to send someone money to someone, who doesn't have a private channel with me, I have to try to send it to somebody who then can send it to someone who then sends it to someone who then sends it to, someone. We create a link, a path through the network of private channels. And if everyone's connected to a few people, then that's surprisingly few steps, actually. And especially if you have like central nodes that act as spokes, that's where like you can make money, I think, is that if you put in and you build a lot of social capital for yourself and you create these capitalized private channels that have like a little bit of liquidity in each one, then you can serve as a middleman to sort of like route transactions through the network. And it's like, this is what's going on with regular banks. Mm-hmm. This is the banking system that's built on top of the main blockchain, which is the government military-backed consensus mechanism. So there's an analog there between like fiat, governments and fiat currency in the banking system, and proof of work, Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. And naturally, you have layers of this kind of system. And what makes the Lightning Network fundamentally superior, I mean, besides the fact that we're not using violence as the base level consensus mechanism, is that it's permissionless in the sense that I don't have to like you and I can't open a bank. We can't open a bank because the banking system has been in place for so long that there's like these legal barriers erected that are like moats to try to keep everyone out. And everyone knows that. Anyone who's paying attention, like liberals, this is not a controversial idea. So you need like a new context in which literally anyone who wants to figure out how to use the software to set up the channels and set up a little server and do this thing can start building equity for themselves in terms of just being like a trusted operator to route payments. And right now you're only going to make like a few dollars to do it, and it's not worth it. But I just think in the future, owning a channel is going to be a huge asset that you might then be able to like sell to somebody or just operate on your own. And it's great because it's not just something you just like buy and hope for the best. It's something you actually have to put in work. So it's kind of cool. God, if I wasn't working on satellite, that's what I'd be doing right now.
So should we give a few parting remarks about Vitalik Buterin on Time magazine?
Oh, was he? I didn't know that.
Vitalik Buterin is on the cover of Time magazine.
Oh, good for him. Well, why is he just what?
The headline is he has concerns. That's like the big like phrase under his photo. And I didn't read the story, but no. I assumed you would have known. So I thought you might have had thoughts about it.
I think now that you've mentioned, I think I saw a thing. I thought that it was like a photoshopped image, though. I didn't actually think he was. I thought someone just put him on the cover. I didn't know that he actually was. That's cool.
Wow, what an amazing point in history we are, that like you see something like that and you just like, oh, fake.
Well, I just assumed it was a meme. I assumed it was like how like you go on the internet, there's a picture of like Elon Musk like.
So when World War III starts, will anyone be convinced that it actually exists? And is that how people get other people to go to war and die? It's like you have to convince them that the conflict actually exists.
Oh wow. I mean, there was some, who was it said like
And
the first
is
casualty.
that going to be world peace, where you just can't convince this conspiracy theory-addled population that the war is actually happening?
Well, they said that. Yeah, that'd be wow.
So just no one shows up to fight it because no one even thought it was real.
Ooh, only reason I think that might not work is because I think that the success of conspiracy theories follows like a Pareto distribution, and you'd still have conspiracy theories that were the most successful and would be like successful enough to convince people to do things.
But I think my thing about philosophy acts on there is the population is ultimately going to go with the thing that pushes us in the direction we need to go next.
We hope so.
Well, I think that's how you have to look at it, as a higher dimensional being forced to make sense out of the chaos, or else you'll go insane. Like that's what I've been building my myth about the 8-year portal that we're going through, starting with Trump.
Yeah.
Where we, as a population, as a world population, we glommed onto COVID as a narrative, not because it was true or had much like actual effect on bodily health for many people, but because it was the best way to move us in a very specific direction that we're all going.
We needed it.
We needed it for some reason.
Oh God, what do we need next?
Something nice, I hope.
I think so. Only because of this thing called reversion to the mean, where usually right when you think that everything is so bad, that's most likely when things are good is going to happen, because it's just, I don't know. I think that actually the fact that everyone thinks everything is so hopeless is a pretty good piece of evidence that it actually isn't, because something about everyone thinking everything's great makes me nervous. You know, like it feels like there's a bit of like a way for bad things to sneak in.
I don't know. I've never been in such a time.
Neither have I. But if I imagine, if I turn on the TV and I was like, everything is perfect, I'd be like, oh God, what's gonna happen? You know what I mean?
That's different than like a positive mood of highlighting good things that are new and novel.
If this feeling of positivity comes from me, I trust it. If it comes from other people, depending on how well I know that person, I might trust it. If it comes from the government authorities, I am going to develop a kind of like Soviet-style cynicism about the whole enterprise.
Like I saw a YouTube Fox News segment about the huge party that Elon Musk is throwing in Austin, Texas, to celebrate opening a gigafactory there, to just pump out mountains and mountains of new Teslas all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge party, and it's called a cyber rodeo, and fun Vegas light installations everywhere. And it was like a news segment, just like shooting fireworks and joy and exuberance was the whole thing. And then it got really stupid almost immediately after that. It went to an interview with the governor of Texas, and it made it something about all the great things that the governor of Texas did to help it happen. Yes. Yes. I only gave him the right amount of bureaucratic restrictions. And so this whole party and all this wealth being generated, I think I'm responsible for.
I think a lot of people have, again, Stockholm syndrome with bureaucratic restrictions, where they are trying
completely.
They want to think of their antagonists in a positive way, so it's easier to live. Like, oh, these people who are blocking me at every turn they're trying to help, and without them, with no regulation, things could just fall apart. We should be grateful. Like, fuck that, man. Like, what is...
Careful, you're sounding real Randian right now.
When did we start feeling like we needed a limiting function on on culture, like
from the dawn of time, I think.
Yeah, well, I just think that okay, it's like, like in a racing game where you're like going up against, and you're gonna hit there's like a ramp where you like in Mario Kart, there's always like a ramp, and
The
you have
super
to
speed ramp?
You gotta be like really fast to like hit the ramp to like jump the chasm. Otherwise,
Oh, okay. It doesn't boost your speed. You have to have enough speed before you hit
exactly.
the ramp if you're gonna jump the gap.
You can't put on the brakes before you're on this particular stretch of road.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what, like, you made me think of it, like the FAA right now has been doing this environmental review thing for the Starship launch facility that's in Texas, Boca Chica, Texas. And they were supposed to have concluded the review and certified the location to launch Starships by February, and they delayed it to March, and then now they delayed it to April. Mm-hmm. And it's unclear if they're going to delay it again. So basically they set these deadlines for themselves and failed multiple times in a row. And some bureaucrat is single-handedly burning incredible amounts of capital and incredible amounts of time and making it ever more likely that humans will not get off the planet in time. Mm-hmm. Because of I don't know, there might be like like it's just fake, made up. Like meanwhile, like all over the world, there's like oil tankers just like dumping shit everywhere.
Yeah.
And like Elon Musk is like trying to like do something different. Like, oh, but there's like a moss here. Like, okay, look, and I'm not like an eco-fascist. I'm not like, I don't think that like we should just fuck the environment. But you know what? The cost-benefit analysis is absolutely batshit crazy to think that like there has to be an ability to go, this is worth a lot and could potentially be massively beneficial to the environment, everything, if we just realized our priorities instead of clinging to this idea of like, that like anyone who's trying to do something crazy just needs to be slowed down just in case. And it's amazing to see people who support SpaceX and everything, but they're also like, well, the FAA is just doing their job. It's like, no, people need to be more angry about this. You don't stop apologizing for this kind of delay. I think I'm in the minority opinion with this because everything I've read online seems to go against this attitude.
Well, it's my attitude too that I have. I think you can trace most evil effects of all history to bureaucracy.
But bureaucracy is like an excuse for being afraid. It's just like people who are appointed to be responsible for why things can't happen.
It's more than an excuse to be afraid. It's cannibalism, and it's human sacrifice, to use Rand's words.
Oh, really?
It's saying that the people who are weak have something over the people who are strong, and the strong people owe those weak people something. Not because the weak people did anything to deserve it, but because it's human sacrifice. We take the strongest thing and we just like tear it apart.
I wish people would concentrate their opposition on people who are ill-intentioned rather than people who are just successful.
Well, the successful people don't even have time of day for bad actors. They don't even pay attention to them. And that's the secret, is you just don't pay attention to the idiots. And then they just fade into deserved obscurity. Like, that was the way to dismiss Trump in 2016.
Just stop thinking about him, stop talking about him.
Yeah,
true. Yeah.
Like, there's...
Oh God, maybe I'm talking about bureaucrats too much. They're living in my head rent-free, bro.
Right. So that is an argument to say. It's like, how much do we gain by even saying that they're bad? But it does seem to be important to say it at this point because it's such a minority opinion.
Sure.
No one else is coming out and saying, like, the anarchist, like, truly free market capitalist attitude that, like, you don't owe anyone anything. Like, just rational self-interest, just making your life better, makes other people's lives better.
I just think having an attitude, trying to always figure out what everyone owes everyone, I think just results in just a backstabby, stagnant, jealous social environment.
Well, it's about human nature, and how do you get everyone into the jobs that they're most meant to be doing? And you have to give maximum freedom to the maximum people.
Yeah, you have to let people try.
So that they can self-select into the places where they're most suited.
Yeah.
And these FAA people are missing their deadlines because they're not getting paid to meet the deadlines. They're getting paid to sit at a desk.
Honestly, they might even be getting paid to miss their deadlines. There might be some corruption because you know that like there's a tremendous amount of like people who have an interest in seeing SpaceX fail or at least be delayed because there's a bunch of competitors that are trying to put up alternative satellite constellations, and I absolutely would not put it past like Jeff Bezos to like try to like lobby like have some way of just like throwing bureaucratic obstacles, and like that shows you.
Which is another way of saying he can't compete, so he uses a gun.
Yeah, it's violence ultimately because the authority of the government is an abstraction of violence. It's violence.
Yeah.
It's someone who can't win, and so they resort to violence. And it's absolutely crazy to see people apologizing for that. Apologizing for it shows you how the usage, like the unaccountable bureaucratic structures themselves are kind of like a liability to even, it's just a loaded gun laying around. It's like, would you leave like a loaded gun on your coffee table if you had a toddler? I wouldn't. Why? Because you're just going to pick it up and hurt someone, right? You probably want to not do that. I think that's what bureaucratic, like the FAA is like, okay, sure, they do a lot of good and they do like safety inspections and stuff, but also they have the ability to be used as a political cudgel to, just between competing interests. And it's of course, I don't sell, I'm not advocating like abolishing the FAA. I think that there just has to be a cultural attitude of like, hey, this is you're just an administration body that's supposed to like make sure things are safe. Why are you having a say in what the human future is going to be based on your random little decision? Are you really qualified to make this decision? I thought you were just appointed to like fill out paperwork or something. What did you do to deserve this level of power? It's really just the inability of centralized institutions to effectively delegate their authority to people who are capable of wielding it responsibly. Yeah. Yeah,
I agree with you, obviously.
Yeah, I'm preaching to the choir, bro. I feel like this is just like when we get into this, I feel like your like Randian attitude and my like restrictions are just like this thing that just intensifies. I don't know. I am so against things like rules that you say like you can't do stuff, I don't know.
Well,
it probably comes across as really juvenile, to be honest, sometimes. But I don't care. Maybe it is.
And I haven't landed on this point in like maybe like 8 months now, so it's good to come back to it.
Yeah.
That I cannot wait for you to actually read Atlas Shrugged.
Oh yeah.
Because she's put the work in to make her own personal argument to help elevate an apparently juvenile, like, just let me be free.
Yeah.
Just get off my back.
Shut up, Mom.
Yes.
FAA.
She's put in the work, a novel's worth of work and a lifetime's worth of work to build the most robust case possible from the base foundational levels of philosophy possible for simple fucking freedom.
Yeah.
As the only way forward to solve problems.
She sounds like someone who was personally burned in that whole department of freedom.
Oh yeah. She was burned bad, and so you get one person's view on it with all the trauma of that person, but she actually did some work and made a positive statement that isn't about bad guy destroy bad guy. It's about like goodness. Where does goodness come from? How do we maximize the goodness? how do humans become gods, and how
Yeah.
can we become gods faster and better?
I know, man.
And
we have to channel this rage against the machine into something that is hopefully at least better than actual rage against the machine.
And so I think you reading it will push your thoughts forward, like the way strong thinkers do. They cut this wake in the water, and it's not that they're right, it's that they have a clear fucking thought that they carried to the end zone. And so now you, just by reading it, have a zillion new Stuart Bowman clear thoughts that are in contrast to her thoughts.
I think that your ideas, it's like if you don't carry them through, you don't know if they're right or wrong. It's like, or put another way is like, if you don't, like, you have to, like, okay, if you don't have any power, it doesn't matter what you imagine that you would do in any given situation.
Sure.
Like, you don't know, like, criticizing someone with no power, criticizing someone with power for doing the wrong thing is like implicitly saying, well, if I was in that position, I wouldn't do that. It's like, you don't know what you would do. You have the luxury of never having been in the position of making that position, or let's say that, you know, maybe. So like, yeah, it's there's something there about just, you have to have a certain basic faith in your own intentions, that you're not trying to fuck things up, and that if everyone adopted the idea that we wouldn't do things just because we could fuck things up, I'm willing to bet that on average things would be worse than if people tried what they honestly thought would be good. Because, like, yeah, it's just a basic articulation of, do you think humans are good or bad?
That's right.
If we're fundamentally...
It's a basic yes.
Right.
It's a basic yes to everything. I can even apply this to the COVID thing, where I don't even think, like, I'm calling bullshit on every single fucking part of that phenomena that happened past, like, April 2020. Everything that happened past that point
that was where reality diverged.
Was almost complete bullshit.
That was the fork in the road.
But the Moderna and Pfizer and those big companies making the vaccines, like, I still say that's inherently good, that they went to work on it with the technology that they'd been working on in their own labs in private the entire time anyway. They were prepared to put their own personal solution into play to respond to that. That's basically good. It's just them reaching their hands out to quash down everyone else's solutions. Yeah. That was bad. We needed that solution, yes, the vaccines, and everyone else's fucking solutions too.
Yeah, I just
think we needed everyone to generate ideas.
We have to make technology and a culture in which violence is just off the table, and you can't resort to it. We can't let the violent sort of like like the brutes who just want to who've decided that the game isn't worth it, to stop everyone else from playing the game of life. There's something there just about, like, decentralizing the will of humans and making it not possible for one person's will to just unwillingly just, like, suck people in. Like, you should have to earn, if you want to use someone else's will for your vision, you should have to convince that person to add their will to your vision. And that's a really good thing. That's what just blows my mind, that, like, people don't like somebody like Elon Musk, who has convinced people to be inspired. Like,
that's right.
So if you're against him, you're also against everyone else who thinks that what he's doing is good. Like, why don't you direct your energy towards, like, I don't know, like the dictator of Turkey or something? That guy doesn't. Or
better yet, get to work on your own fucking thing.
Right, but if you don't have any talent and you just need to be angry, at least be angry against someone who is, like, doesn't have creativity and just all they know is just power and violence and is only are where they are because of
No, the people are already angry at the right people. The people who are resentful at Elon Musk are specifically the personalities that have something to hatch in their garage, and they're afraid to do that. Like,
oh, interesting.
And so they're resentful of the person who's actually doing what they want to do.
Yeah, there's no...
You're only angry at Elon Musk if you secretly, privately know you have something
so
important to do
true.
that you're avoiding.
There is no more bitter character than a failed artist.
Yeah. And you're really
Wow.
you're really only failing every moment that you spend not
Wow.
working on it.
Wow. That's why I think a lot of environmentalists, it's fashionable for environmentalists to hate Elon Musk, like something like he, mined lithium in Bolivia and it was bad for the environment. It's like, well, you know what also he's doing is like doing the thing that you're pretending to be doing, which is solving climate change.
He did
Yeah.
he did in 10 years what you guys have been saying you're doing for 50 or 60 years.
Yeah, it's...
And he made shit tons of money doing it.
See, that was his sin. If he would have lost money, then it would have been good. Right. If he would have made himself weaker and less able to actually do what because then people don't want to be called out. And that's a really good point about like how people who criticize people who do things are people who like want to but are afraid. Well, you know why? Because successful people bring out the shadow in people who are failed seekers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're someone who's just kind of like happy and is like, I'm just happy with life. Yeah, maybe you're gonna be like, oh, that guy's doing something great. But like, I don't have like this need to tear him down because that shadow doesn't have as much power over me because maybe I just aren't that kind of person.
So
Damn.
So in that sense, the most uncomfortable thing that could possibly happen for us is for Jesus to be reborn. Like an uber human.
Oh shit.
The best one. Like objectively the best one. Physical, here on earth, showing you just how far you have to go still.
It's like, Jesus, just take a little longer, please.
Maybe the crucifixion makes complete sense.
Maybe
trad
cath is the true religion.
Maybe that's probably the most logical thing that'll happen next time he shows up.
Oh man.
That's literally what it says in the Bible is he'll be labeled as Antichrist or something. Or maybe I'm now borrowing on New Age conspiracy theory novels.
All I know is I support the anti-pope.
I intuitively feel that when Christ is reborn, he will be labeled by all the centralized institutions as Antichrist.
Bro, what if Satoshi Nakamoto was Jesus?
Well, I have a theory about this.
Okay. Because he is Jesus to a lot of people. Psychologically, he is to a lot of people.
I think Jesus is a multi-dimensional artist that incarnates in a bunch of different people and things at once.
Okay. Yeah, I think I heard this in church one time. I remember my pastor talking about this. Yeah.
And so I think the resurrection or the second coming.
Yeah.
I totally think the second coming can happen and will happen. And the mechanism by which it will happen is by a bunch of individual actors being a decentralized, democratized John the Baptist.
Okay.
Like 30 to 500 John the Baptists, all alive within a 60-year period.
The vanguard.
And acting on a really high level to the mycelial network style, break up all the bullshit and pave the way for then 1 to 5 really, really superpowered individuals.
Just break a bunch of little chunks of mycelium and sprinkle them across the substrate.
And then maybe that second coming isn't even publicized. Maybe the revolution isn't even publicized. Maybe the only fucking people who even notice those 1 to 5 literal Jesus people are the 30 to 500 John the Baptist people. And because that's the only safe way for such a powerful person to incarnate physically is within camouflage. And so most people never even see the inner layer of the egg. They just see the scattered John the Baptist, like, half powerful people. And those half powerful people are like doing a camouflage act so that the super fucking people can do what they need to do without the bureaucratic triggers switching on.
Okay, but
so that's my answer. Satoshi whatever is one of the vanguard.
But who baptizes the baptizers? I feel like maybe
they baptize themselves.
They're auto-baptismal.
That's the new religion, is realizing that you're responsible for your fucking life.
That is the religion,
and
isn't it?
No authority can tell you that it's time to do what you want to do. You just have to say it's time.
Holy shit. That's what it is, yeah.
And all they do, how you know them by their fruits, all they do is empower other people to start doing what they want to do.
Millennials were people who didn't know what to do and thought that someone was going to tell them. And Gen Z people are people who don't know what to do and know that nobody knows how to tell them. And maybe there's going to be another group of people that accepts that fact natively and realizes maybe that Gen Z, or they had it wrong too, that like, you were always supposed to do what you were going to do the whole time. Has there ever been a point in history like this before where like there was like a mass realization in society that you could actually there was just a myth vacuum?
Is that the American Revolution? I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know either, to tell you the truth. I wouldn't know either. Our imagination of that is probably really just our view of the world now packaged into that, what we imagine that milieu was.
It was a dogma of kings.
Yeah.
Kings only. Those are the only sovereign, free-willed people that are allowed. And a bunch of fucking Yankees were like, fuck them. Why? Because we feel like it. So
now
we want to live.
Now we just have new gods, these stagnant King George people, and we think that governments rule over us. We respect them. We think they're so serious and important and real, but it's really just a bunch of silly stories. It's a bunch of TV production. It's just a theatrical construct. It's just clowns.
A bunch of people praying to God that they'll never actually have to do their job.
It's just a bunch of people just on Zoom getting a paycheck and parading around in funny hats. That's what it is. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, there's a bunch of like artists and hackers just like, just trying to just fucking around because it's fun. It's always been about fun. I feel like the vitality and beauty and health of the world comes from people who enjoy what they do.
That's right.
And it always has. And
well, it's biological in that way. Your body tells you when you're in the right place in the forest because it's fucking fun.
There's been a resurgence of writers lately, I feel like, too. I feel like they're still under the ground, but I feel like there could be a real vibrant writing culture in the next few years because there's a huge need for it, and there's a big vacuum. Because everyone generationally has just been numbed by feeds, and we've forgotten what reading how enjoyable reading really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be cool for my portfolio if you were right.
Yeah.
Because then Jade and I would make a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, that's partially why I'm commenting on that. I think you're on the right track with that. I think being a curator of things is important.
It's a big fish thing we get to do. It's the same thing happened when Ada and I started doing heavy metal. Jade and I are noticing that the two of us and our very, very elementary writing skills
Yeah.
are accidentally some of the best writers alive. Two of the best writers alive. Not because we've like earned that title in any sense of the word, but because we're the only people trying to do it.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I guess not.
Yeah.
How'd you do? Did you get bit at all?
Not that I noticed.
Yeah, me neither.